Well, thank you. Well, thanks everybody for being here tonight. A nice picture. We'll talk in a minute. I promised I would read this paragraph, so let me. You have heard and will hear about the wonderful things that we're doing at this college and the ways in which your generosity to the college could help us even further enrich our students' education. Members of the 1832 Society provide a philanthropic legacy. You're helping to ensure a great future for Gettysburg College students for years to come. As members of the Cupola Society, your annual leadership gifts positively impact the current Gettysburg experience through supporting scholarships, financial aid, faculty excellence, athletics, student life, and all academic departments. All of your gifts, smaller and larger, have meaningful impact. But I want to point out the ways in which your generosity actually changes the college itself as an institution. Okay, let's talk. So, when I was a kid, phones were these big things that sat on tables and were attached to walls, and they had one function. They called other phones that sat on tables or were attached to walls. That's just what they did, right? But my kids are going to grow up where a phone does so many things. Well, of course a phone has a camera in it, and it plays music, and it plays games, right? I mean, the idea of a phone has so radically changed. But not only has it changed, but the ability to take that phone and shrink it down, put it in your pocket, walk around with it, be able to capture things, send things, right? It really has radically changed every aspect of society. What I want to argue tonight is that if you endow a chair or endow a fund at the college, what you're actually doing is turning someone like me from an old-fashioned Rotary faculty member into an I faculty 5. Right? That it really changes the college in interesting structural ways. Now, before I get to that argument, I'm going to use two examples, and I want to point to the people whose generosity led to these. One is, the chair I'm in, and I've seen several people in the room who formerly held the Ed and Cindy Johnson Chair for Distinguished Teaching in the Humanities. We lost Ed not long ago, and when I think about what it is we're trying to do here as an institution, right? What we as a liberal arts college produce in our students, what I really think of is Ed Johnson. I mean, here's a person who not only was equipped to go out into the world and to have a very successful career, but he did it in a way in which his values, his faith, his thought were not disconnected from how he lived. His life of ideas and his life as lived were not separate. They really were one. And so when I think of what we do, really I think of Ed, and he's going to be missed terribly. But he and Cindy have been so committed to this community in so many ways. And the one thing that I'm going to want to talk about is this chair for distinguished teaching that I now hold. The other pair of donors that I'm going to want to talk about are Fred and Martha Mahan. Fred is from the class of '52, and he and his wife have endowed what we call the Mahan Great Questions Fund. And Fred, like Ed, is somebody who throughout his life continues to allow these deep questions to maintain a central focus in his life. And so with these two pairs of donors, what you really do see is the lived life of the liberal arts. So now, when I look at what I do, I was hired here for a purpose, right? I am the philosopher of science. So I teach the logic class, I teach the critical thinking class, I teach the philosophy of science classes. I often teach with people in other departments or write with other scientists. But my job when I was hired here was to fill a box, right? this is a college. We have a small faculty. Each department realizes it needs somebody here, it needs somebody here, it needs somebody here. And my job was to come in and make Gettysburg College great by doing what I do well, by teaching philosophy well. My job was to take that little box that I'm in and fill it out in the best way that I can, to be the best philosophy of science teacher that I could be. But what was interesting is that once I was put in the Johnson Chair for Distinguished Teaching, I didn't have just one function. Part of what goes along with the Johnson Chair is the call to mentor all of the incoming faculty in teaching. Now, each Johnson Chair does it in his own way. What I've decided to do, in addition to a series of seminars where we discuss elements, is I take each new tenure-track faculty member, each person who's going to be here, hopefully for 30, 35 years, I take them to lunch. We sit down. We talk about where they're from, what their worries are, what they teach, how they teach it. We get to know each other, and then I go to their classroom. I sit in German classes. I sit in materials labs. I sit in the wood shop where they're making the sets, right? All through this college, the context of each teacher is so radically different that what this chair has done for me is to take me out of my box, out of my place where my job in making this a great institution is to do this little piece well. Now suddenly my scope is institutional. Suddenly I'm up out of this little slot. And what I am now is someone like a new phone. I don't have just the one function where my job was to do that function well. Now my job is larger. My job is to make connections. My job is to see the institution as a whole. And that's what the endowed chair does. It doesn't just honor the donor by having the name there. It doesn't just honor the faculty member by saying, job well done. What it does is it takes you to a different place. What the endowed chair does is actually make you a professor, not of your department, but of the college. And as a result, new possibilities. Thank you. My mom. New possibilities arise that weren't there when I was just within my box. And the same thing is true of the Mahan Great Questions Fund. Now, we had a senior writing a senior thesis last year named Caleb Sistek, and he was writing on Thoreau's notion of wildness. And he started by doing what anybody would do if you were doing this. He took Thoreau and he read him carefully, and then he found the secondary sources who wrote about Thoreau and he read them. But now that we had the Mahan Fund, what we were able to do over spring break, in the middle of his writing, he went to Walden. He sat at the pond. Then he went to the Maine woods, which during our spring break are still very, very cold and very, very wild. And he went to the exact spots, seeing the exact same vistas that Thoreau was seeing when he was writing. And suddenly that project was a different project. What the man was able to do for him was to engage possibilities that without it, it's not that we were thinking, you know, boy, if only we had the money, it'd be great to do this. It created the possibility of possibility. So what you can do when you have these funds, when you have these endowed chairs, are things that are unforeseeable. Now, there are certainly certain needs at the college that are like bolts, and they're loose. And if only we had the money would be like a wrench, and we can tighten it to the desired tightness, right? I mean, there is certain sets of needs that are predictable. And yeah, it is absolutely wonderful when we get gifts that meet those needs. But there are certain other things. Endowed chairs and endowed funds, what they do is something completely different. What they do, we can't tell. They create the opportunity to create these unforeseen possibilities. We have an amazing faculty here. We have incredible students here. And you have no idea, any given day when you're sitting in your office and the door's open and they walk in, you don't know what they're going to say. And sometimes you say, wow, where are we going to go with this? And what the Mahan Fund does is allow us to take it in these new and exciting directions. So take this as a pitch. I mean, that's in essence what it really is. But it's there for a reason, because it really does elevate the ability to see the institution as a structure. It doesn't just change the college in taking a piece of it, it changes the very structure of the college as a whole. So for those of you who are thinking of these sorts of grand opportunities, please, please do think seriously. Now, at the end, they added this line that I'm supposed to read, and I'm not going to do it right now. It says, at this time, I'm pleased to introduce President Janet Morgan Riggs, class of 1977, but I got the mic. You're going to listen to me. So I was on the committee that selected Janet to become provost back when, and on the one hand, the committee had no doubt that she would make an absolutely wonderful provost. The only thing that gave us pause was taking one of our best teachers, one of our favorite teachers, out of the classroom. And there was a pang of loss from that, but it was overcome. And she occupied one side of that third floor in Penn Hall and did so wonderfully. And then when she moved across, the opportunity to install her as president, yeah, the faculty felt a little sad because, God, she was such a great provost. But now, I mean, we have this really interesting situation where the faculty looks at Janet, right, and we think, all right, we got one of ours as the president. The alumni looks and thinks, all right, we got one of ours as the president. The students think, all right, we got one of ours as the president. And it's just what we were talking about a minute ago, being able to step out of your box and see things institutionally. We are so lucky to have somebody who does occupy simultaneously all of those perspectives. So it is my absolute joy to bring to you the person who signs my paychecks. At this time, I am pleased to introduce President Janet Morgan Riggs, class of 1977.